Okay, so what I wanted to go over is how to do a nice presentation of an object by doing screen captures, okay, instead of rendering. So what I have is a crate in here, and I'm going to show it twice. So I just made a copy of the crate and then pulled the top up so that I could see inside the crate, okay. So from the top, kind of looks like this. All right, then what I'm going to do is frame it in a perspective view until I get a nice framing. Now, by the way, using the center mouse button to zoom in is not very effective. You want to go down here and get the zoom tool, which, by the way, that's Alt-Z, and then you can zoom in by minuscule amounts, okay? Now, we want to plot a nice camera, and what we're going to do is go into an expert mode, okay, which is Alt-X, and that'll get rid of your, Control-Alt-X, which will get rid of your interface. And then I want to zoom in. I want to get it nice and centered, okay. Leave a little bit of room because we're going to be throwing shadows out here, so something like this would be pretty good. You're in a perspective view, and then Control C will turn that into a camera, okay. All right, Control Alt X brings this back down. And I'm just going to go over here and hide my cameras. Okay, now the other thing that I'm doing is I want to cast some shadows on the ground down here. So I've made a cylinder. So it's just a cylinder, that's all it is. But then what I wanted to do is I don't want to see the edge of it. So what I've done is, got it frozen right now. Let's unfreeze this. And I've put a UVW map, okay, so just a plain UVW map, planar from the top, and then I'm creating a special material for that, okay. So now the materials for the crates, I'm just using a regular physical material. I've got the reflection set at 0.8 and the roughness set at 0.7, okay, and that'll give you a pretty good highlight. So we want some nice specular highlights on our object. Now for the ground, I'm just using the default material, okay, but then what I'm doing is I'm putting a gradient ramp into the cutout, okay, so what that's going to do is make transparency as it falls off. So if I go in here and change my object to a box, you'll be able to see. So what it's doing is it's fading off into transparency. So anywhere that this is white is opaque, we'll see shadows, and then it's where it's black, it will fade out into transparent. So if I go in here and change my viewport from performance to standard mode, then you'll start seeing that it's becoming transparent out there. Okay, you could barely see it in here. It's going to cast a shadow. So now what we're going to eventually want to do is to change this to high quality, and then that was going to bring our lights in, okay, to cast shadows and stuff. But until we get there, let's leave it at performance. Okay, and then I just go ahead and freeze this ground plane so I don't actually move it around, okay. I don't need the grid, I can turn that off. Now I've put some lights in here, okay, and I've got them hidden right now. So initially what I've done from the top is I've got a light right over the top, okay. All of these lights are they're photometric lights, and then I made them as spheres, okay, so the light radiates out, gives a nice soft shadow, okay. I didn't need to get them too big. So then I've got and that's a neutral light, so 6600 is just white. All right, then I'm going to put two other lights, one out here off to the front and off to the left side a little bit, another one off to the right, okay. And then these two I'm going to color, okay, and they're still going to be using Kelvin, so it's natural color. So one of these I'm going to make blue. In my case, it was the right one, so I'm doing 9,000. You don't go over 9,000 because then that's into a spectrum that's not realistic. And then on the left, I'm going to make this warm. Okay, so I've gone to 4800. It doesn't matter if it's warm on the right or warm on the left, but what you're trying to do is get a warm light kind of coming in one direction and a cool light coming in another direction, and right over the top being a neutral light. Okay, so now if I switch to my camera view, and I'll go ahead and bring up my expert mode, and we're going to shade our viewport. And then what I'm going to do is I'm only going to turn on my top light first. Okay, so I'm going to turn that on. This is my light lister. Get that under Tools, Light Lister. And then I want to change this to high quality. And then it's going to have a shaded viewport. Okay. Now you can see I see the icon over here. So what we want to do is to turn it so that over here our controls, what we see is lights, because I don't want to see the lights. Okay, now the way this viewport will shade, okay, take a little bit to catch up. Now I have modified mine, so I've gone over here where this plus button is. If you right click and you go to your viewport settings and you go to this display performance, the display is initially turned down. Okay, the quality is turned down. Okay, now the top one, bake procedural maps, that doesn't really affect us, but this texture maps you want to turn up to 4096. That's the only map I'm really using is this gradient that's down here. But on this background and environments, we want this as high as we get it. I've got like 100,000 or something. We want it as high as we can get it. Just crank it up, okay? And then apply that, and then that'll update your viewport. So everybody's viewport's going to be different, the quality that you can get. Okay, so I mean the better your graphics card, the better it will be. Now on its default, it's going to have some problems in here because by default, when we do high quality, we want to make sure that we're not using default lights. Okay, we're putting lights in here, so we want to make sure we illuminate the scene with lights. We also want to make sure that we do not want ambient occlusion on. Okay. Now the reason, and I'll kind of show you this, ambient occlusion, we do want some ambient occlusion, but we're going to turn it off. But if you can see, there's a little bit of shadowing going off on the edge here. You see some shadow artifacting. And so I'm going to turn that off by default, and then it'll clean that up. All right, so when I turn on my top light, then I can sit here and I can adjust this to how much light I want in here. Now, by the way, another thing that I need to cover is I want to make sure when I'm doing this, I don't want gamma correction on. Gamma correction is the thing for when we're rendering. So under your rendering, pull down to your gamma LUT setup, and you want to go ahead and make sure this is turned off, okay, when we're doing viewport. Another thing is we do not want an exposure control on. Okay, we don't want an exposure control, so make sure this is off. We're going to turn it on for a couple of things, but for right now we want it off. So no gamma, no exposure control. Okay, so now let's go back and bring it up big screen again. So I can manipulate my lights. So I'm going to go with my left warm light, and then I'm going to get that as bright or however much I want. Okay, so you can adjust it for what you're wanting. Okay, say something like that. That looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to go to my blue light that's off on the other side, and then I'm going to adjust that till I get something I like from there. All right, then I'll turn that off and do the top light, get it where I like the top, and then I'm going to turn all of those on, and then we're going to let it sit for a second while it renders it out, and then we're going to do a screen grab of this. Now Max has its own screen grab utility, so if you go under Tools and you pull down to Preview Grab Viewport, you can click Capture Still Image right here. Now this allows you to put a name on it, but then that puts the name on top of our image. We don't want this, so don't put anything in here, and then just hit Grab, and then this will do a nice screen grab of that. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this. I've already set up a file over here in Photoshop, and so I am just going to paste it, Control V, and why didn't it copy it? Maybe I missed it. Copy and paste. And so there's that screen grab pasted in here. Okay, so now I'm going to do multiple screen grabs, and so that's the first one I'm doing. All right, now the second one is I want one that does have that ambient occlusion on there. So we're going to go back into our lighting and turn the ambient occlusion on, and we're going to manipulate it to get this edge shadowing out of here. So we give it a few seconds for it to finish. But yours may take a little bit longer than mine for it to get a nice good render. Okay, once you get that, then same thing, we're going to grab that. So capture the still, grab, and then I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to paste that back on top of this one. And man, why is it not grabbing it? Grab that one. There we go. And then there's that one on top. Okay, so let's leave that. All right, we're going to do some other stuff now. So now I'm going to turn that occlusion off. And so now what I'm going to do is I want to capture some rim lighting. So what I'm doing is I'm taking these two off, and I've copied these other ones. So all I did for this, just so you know, is when I was putting my lights in here, all I did was take these two lights that were up front, and I just hold down the shift key, and I made a copy in here and a copy there. So other than that, these don't have any different attributes than these did. They're just in the back to create us a rim light. Okay, so let's go back to our camera. Back up. Oops, forgot to hide those lights again. Lights. Okay, so all I'm doing now is I'm just turning on these two rim lights. Now make sure that a couple of things I don't think I covered yet, but make sure on your light and shadows that you have it set up for scene lights, not default lights. We want to use the lights we're in here, so make sure it's set on scene lights here. Also on your materials, make sure it's shaded with material with maps. Okay, we don't need realistic materials and maps, we just need shaded materials with maps. And now with my two rim lights on, then I'm going to get some nice lighting that I can put on top of that. Okay, so I'm going to wait a few seconds, then I'm going to grab that. And then I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to paste that in here. Okay, awesome. All right, so now what I need to do is I want to create a mask of these. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to grab, oops, that's the render, grab these, and I'm going to apply a white material to it. Okay, Now this white material is just a white material, but then I came down here and put white in my emissive and turned the emissive all the way up. Okay, and then that's going to get me white in here. Okay, be sure you don't have anything. Now to do this part, we don't want the ground. So I'm going to go back in here, get out of here, and turn off my ground. So all we have is the white on the gray background. That's what we want. We're going to generate a mask from this. So now we're going to grab that. Okay, and then we're going to copy that, take that over to Photoshop. Didn't grab it. What the heck? Sometimes you have to click this a couple of times. And there we go. Okay. So there's for our mask. Okay, so then what we need to do is we're going to come in here and select all our objects. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put this black material that I made on here. Okay, basically it's just a physical material, black color, 0.7 on your reflections, 0.6 on your roughness. And you want to make sure that we're going to have our ground off when we're doing this process. Alright, then what we're going to do is our lights, we want to go ahead and turn all of our lights on. And what we're going to be doing is generating just highlights. So now what we're going to do is we're going to change this over in our exposure control. We're going to turn it on. And the reason we're going to do that is now we can, by adjusting the exposure, I can adjust how much of the highlight is showing on there. Now, I want to go ahead and get a pretty good highlight in there. I don't want to go over the top, but I want a pretty strong highlight on it because I can always turn it down when I'm overlaying it in Photoshop. All I'm really looking for is trying to get these little highlights on these edges. I'm not liking too much. I'm not really wanting to get it so that I'm getting light on the fronts, but just on the little highlights. And so you kind of have to find that sweet spot where we're getting some nice highlights on it. Something similar to that will work pretty good. Okay, and then go back to my X-ray mode, give it a few minutes to catch up, to do its rendering thing. And then we're going to capture that. Same thing we've already been doing. There we go. Bug. Okay, so we're going to get that. We're going to copy that. And then we're going to go over there to Photoshop and we're going to paste that on. Okay, so now that's going to get us some highlights in there. All right, we don't really need these little pieces here. I can just delete those off of there. I need to delete them off of this one too. Actually, I would say let's don't delete them off of this one. What we're going to do on this one is we're going to go and do an auto contrast on it, which is going to turn our background to black. And so now what we want to do is just go ahead and fill those with black there and there. And now what we're going to do here is with this selected, okay, or it's the only thing on, if we go over to our channels and I hold down the control key and I click on it, it's going to select that. And then I go back to my layers, and what I can do is I can go back, say, to this one and add a layer mask to it. It's going to mask everything around it. Now, one of the things I've noticed, though, is when I do that, I get a little bitty pixel halo on it. We don't want that. So I'm going to delete that layer mask off here. We're going to go back to this one, and we're going to select it. And then what I'm going to do with black is I'm going to go Edit, Stroke, 1 pixel, center it, and click OK. Now go back and do your selection of it. Turn that off. And now we won't get that pixel halo around it. Okay. All right, so we want that masked out. We want this one, which was our ambient occlusion. We want that one masked out too. So go back to here, select it again, and we want that one masked out. And that'll get rid of that little shadow around it. Okay, so now we're ready to kind of do our compositing part. Okay, so our base. Okay, then I'm going to put this on top, and I'm going to put this on at darken. So this is adding that shadow back in there, and it's a little dark. I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. I just want a little bit of shadow in there, but not too much. Something about like that. And then this is our backlighting here. We need to get rid of this here. We can just on that, we can just do our healing brush. Make that bigger, and I can heal that out. And I'll heal this out too. Okay, this one's going to be in a lighten mode, so it's just adding light back on top of there. Okay, like so. And then we're going to add this one. This one is on, let's see, I want this one on screen mode. And it's going to pop those highlights back in there, and I don't want it 100%. I'm going to pull that down a little bit. Okay, so now if I group these, we can see before, oops, I didn't want the bottom one in the group, only these in the group. Before, after, before, after. Now we have a very nice presentation piece. Okay, so hopefully you learned a few things there and how we can make a nice presentation out of our screen grab if we just use a little TLC. So we're doing a screen grab without an ambient occlusion, one with an ambient occlusion, then we're going to do a mask on that to get rid of that little halo that it causes out there. We're also doing some secondary lighting we're putting back on top. We're generating a mask, and then we're creating some highlights, mask that out, and when you put all that together, we've got a really nice piece. Okay, hope that helped you guys. Thank you very much.